still maintains make the constant moral presupposition that you should always be aware of what it is that transcends both your understanding and your perceptions. And you should keep firmly in mind that that exists. Now, when people talk about God in the modern world, they tend to think about something that's more, has more the characteristics of a being. And I suppose that's where most of the debate about religious reality comes in. But the idea that there's an absolute that's outside of your perceptual capacity seems to be merely a statement of fact, especially given what we know now about the nature of perception, that the phenomena always transcends the manner in which you frame it. We've also come to understand that not only does reality have multiple levels of existence, but in order to perceive it, you have to stand inside multiple frames. This is a picture of a French city. It's a walled city. Now, the walls are there to keep the people in, and the walls are there to keep what isn't in the walls out. And so you can think about that as a protective structure. Now, I want to tell you how it is that you still inhabit a walled city and exactly what that means. So, for example, you think about this room, and I'm going to tell you how it is that this room allows you to see what it is that you see. Now, when you're interacting with a computer, you actually don't interact with the computer. You interact with the keyboard and the screen. If the computer crashes, then you interact with the computer. And you find that, as a general rule, very annoying, because you don't really understand the computer very well, and you don't actually see how complex it is until it stops working. Most of the time when you're interacting with the world, you're doing things with the world. You're interacting with it in a way that produces some consequence that you want. And that means in part that your perceptions are always framed by what you want. And that's actually one of the reasons why the world isn't just made out of objects. The world is made out of things you use and things that get in your way. Now, you're always applying a frame like that to the world in order to simplify it enough so that you can understand it. And you're aided in this process by all sorts of processes you really don't notice. Because when you look at the world, you think, well, there are the objects. But there's 1,000 things going on before you make that judgment. So, we'll look at this room. When you walk in here, the room tells you what to do. The reason it tells you what to do is because all the seats are pointed in the same direction. They're all slanted in a particular way. When you walk in here and there's other people sitting, you can see that all their faces point to the front. People's faces point towards what interests them. The room is set up to make you face the front. The theory behind the room is that the thing that's interesting in the room is happening at the front. It's a theater. What's happening at the front is a drama, right? Because theater is there to promote and undergird drama. A lecture is a dramatic act. The room tells you what to do. So you don't have to think about what to do when you come into a room like this. You can just do it because the room tells you what to do. And then you can think, you can sit in here in relative comfort and listen to this lecture. Why can you sit in here in relative comfort? Well, the people around you have been relatively carefully selected, right? As a consequence of analysis of their 12 years in school, the university has made a determination that they know how to sit down and listen. That hypothetically they're intelligent enough to understand the lecture, and that they're very unlikely to disrupt the proceedings with any unexpected outburst of emotion or motivation. Now, if anybody broke one of those rules, you can be sure that your eyes would move very rapidly away from me and directly towards the person who was causing the trouble, because that would take center stage. Now, this room is actually supported by 1 million invisible processes. So, for example, while you're sitting in here, you don't have to worry about whether it's raining, because there's a roof, and you don't have to worry about whether the roof is going to fall in, because you make the presumption that the people who built the roof are competent. And the electricity works because the utility is run by people who are competent, so it's almost always on. Buildings hardly ever burn down. The electricity hardly ever fluctuates. There's thousands of people out there working as hard as they can diligently to make this environment constant enough so that you can ignore all the thousands of things that you're ignoring, so that you can concentrate well enough to attend to the few things that you are attending to while you're in this room. You're in a walled city. There's multiple walls, and those walls protect you from what's outside the walls. You can think about it this way. This is a Taoist image of reality. Now, people think about this as a metaphysical symbol. But it's not a metaphysical symbol. It's an unbelievably practical symbol. The Taoists believe that the world, the reality, is made up essentially of chaos and order. Chaos is all those things you don't understand. So I would say that chaos is all those things that exist outside of your perceptual preconditions. Order is all the things you do understand and all the places you go where the things that you do produce the results that you intend. And the Taoists would say, everywhere you go is like that. Everywhere you go has things that you understand that are orderly and has things that you don't understand that are chaotic. And the chaotic things attract your attention because you already understand the orderly things. If something unexpected happens, your nervous system automatically reacts to it and orients you towards it. And sometimes that can be catastrophic. So this is an experience that some of you will have in the next 4 years. Undoubtedly, there's a number of you that want to go to medical school, or to graduate school, or to law school, or to business school. And a certain percentage of you will take the admission tests that will determine whether or not you're able to take that path. And a certain percentage of you will score below the 50th percentile on those tests. And that will mean you will not be going to those institutions. And when that happens, first of all, you'll shake and tremble when you open the envelope to find out your results. And second, if you haven't achieved the score that you expected that you achieve, your world will fall apart. And what that'll mean is that you descend from the domain of order into the domain of chaos. And that happens to people all the time. It happens to people when they develop an illness that's serious that they can't control. Because then their body stops becoming something they can predict and starts to become something that they can't predict. It happens to people when they're in an intimate relationship and they're betrayed. They assume fidelity and the person tells them that they've had an affair. That's chaos. That means you didn't know who that person was. The future you imagined no longer exists. Your perceptions of people are erroneous at some level of analysis that you don't understand. It's conceivable that you're naive beyond belief and that everything you believed about yourself and other people up to that point is false. And when a revelation occurs that knocks out one of the walls that supports you and you descend accidentally into chaos, you'll regard that as one of the worst experiences of your life. When that happens to you, your brain knows exactly what to do. It stops thinking about the future. It stops saving up resources for the future. It puts you in emergency preparation mode so that you're ready to do anything at the drop of a hat because you don't know what to do. So your body prepares to do everything. It shifts your cortisol levels up. It activates your left and right cortices. Your limbic system and your motivational systems are disinhibited, turned on, and you sweat and you can't sleep because the orderly structure that you thought you inhabited that provided you with security and direction has now disappeared. The Taoists believe that the world is always an interplay between chaos and order, and that if you live your life properly, you stand with one foot in order and one foot in chaos. Because if you're only in order, nothing that's interesting ever happens to you. Nothing is anything but a repeat of all the things that you already know. That's the state that fascists desire. Because fascists desire things to be exactly the way they are forever. And if you're in a state that's only characterized by chaos, you're at sea or overwhelmed or things have fallen apart for you. And there's too much of everything for you to deal with. Now the Taoists, being very wise people, know other things as well. They know, for example, that chaos can turn into order. That's why there's a white dot in the middle of the black paisley. And they know that order can turn into chaos, which is why there's a black dot in the middle of the white paisley. And the Taoists believe that a meaningful life, the optimally meaningful life, is to be found on the border between chaos and order. And I would say that your nervous system tells you exactly when you are there, and it's a kind of place. And you can tell when you're there because you're secure enough to be confident, but not so secure that you're bored. And you're interested enough to be awake, but not so interested that you're terrified. And when you're in a state like that, when you find things interesting and meaningful, time slips by you and you're no longer self-conscious. This is a medieval Christian representation of the nature of reality. On the outside, you have the Virgin Mary. Inside the Virgin Mary, you have God the Father. And God the Father is supporting a crucifix with an individual on it. The individual in Christian thinking is Christ. What does this image mean? The walled city divides order from chaos, or order from nature. We think about nature as the thing that's outside of what we understand. That's Mother Nature.